the most widely observed Jewish holiday, begins 2 weeks from tonight, when millions of Jews and their family members, including some who are not Jewish, and friends, will sit down at a Passover Seder. For some, that moment will be the culmination of a lot of preparation. In addition to preparing for the Seder itself, some people will have spent many hours removing chametz from their homes and their offices. That means a thorough cleaning throughout the house, giving away a lot of different products with chametz, changing dishes, or in some cases, boiling hot water and pouring them over dishes and over pots and pans and utensils and a lot more. For others, it may be a bit of a less chore, but they'll do some degree of removing chametz from their homes. Whatever we do physically, I think in some way helps to prepare us spiritually as we kick off this week of Passover. Of course, one of the highlights of most people's Seder are the 4 questions when we bring out the little kid and in the high-pitched voice they start them on, Ishtana, that light's in your eyes, that sun is in your eyes. I used to have a clicker here. It's not here anymore. I'm sorry. We used to have something that would allow us to close the drapes. Daniel, do we have that in the back there? Can we close the drapes from... Daniel has the clicker. I want to suggest, in addition to the 4 questions in your Haggadah, I want to suggest 4 other questions that you consider raising at your Seder. You won't find these, as I mentioned in the Haggadah, you'll find them in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Fathers, which is a tractate of the Talmud. The questions are raised by Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma, and like in our Passover Haggadah, he offers responses to each of the questions as well. The first question Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma asks is, who is wise? How might each of us answer the question, who is wise? Rabbi ben Zoma says, who is wise? He who can learn from others. And from this, we learn the importance of appreciating other people's experiences. It means we don't have to do something bad to know that it's bad. We don't have to, as the euphemism goes, eat poison to know it's bad for us. Other people have done that. But it also means we can learn from generations which precede us. What's the Jewish teaching, Ledor Vador, from generation to generation? It doesn't mean we should just exist from generation to generation. It means we should pass on the wisdom of our tradition from one generation to the next. Youth is beautiful. Youth is a gift. By the way, old age is beautiful. And old age is a gift as well, if things are good in one's life. But youth is beautiful, and engaging our youth is critical and vital. And yet, not only do our youth need guidance, and when I say youth, I don't just mean little ones, teenagers and people in their early 20s, they appreciate it. But sometimes we don't like to give it to them. You remember when I was in college, there was a saying, don't trust anybody over 30. That was a terrible thing. That was a terrible thing. Because you learn as you get older. When I was a student, there were some students at Stanford University. I was not at Stanford. But at Stanford University, a group of students got together and they began to protest the curriculum in the history department. They felt they knew more. And you know what happened? The professors at Stanford University gave in, and they changed the curriculum to make the students happy. Well, think about that. A 19-year-old somehow knew more than a Stanford University professor who'd been studying history in some cases for 30 years. It wasn't true. They did it to mollify the students, and they did, but they didn't do the students a favor. There's a fine line between taking things into consideration and changing them because students of a particular era don't like something. The truth is that young people, particularly young men and women in their teens and in their 20s, appreciate guidance. They appreciate wisdom, and we do them a disservice by not offering it to them. We do them a disservice by not offering them serious Judaism and changing it to necessarily fit the feeling at the moment. Let me ask each of you something. Are you wiser today than you were 20 years ago? Is anybody here not wiser today than they are 20 years ago? It's rhetorical. Every single one of you would raise your hand. Well, if that's true, then why wouldn't we share that wisdom with youth? We should. It's part of our responsibility. We can learn from one another, and we can learn not only from 20 years of wisdom, but 3,200 years of wisdom given to us at Mount Sinai. Who is wise? Indeed, as Rabbi Ben Zoma responded, one who can learn from others. Which leads to Rabbi Ben Zoma's second question: who is strong? How would you respond to that question? Who is strong? Rabbi Ben Zoma replies, who is strong? One who can say no to himself, or herself, I would add. This teaches us that there's an internal and healthy struggle within the human spirit. This is about saying no to our desires sometimes, should they become destructive. This is all about learning a certain degree of self-discipline. Anybody who's attempted a diet knows how difficult it is to change eating habits. We all have habits that aren't in our self-interest, and changing them takes a big deal. It's a big deal. Even if you observe Passover for 7 days, changing your regular habits takes self-discipline. And yet, having that strength, having self-discipline, leads to a richer and happier life. I don't know anybody who lacks self-discipline who is happy. Do you? Judaism teaches us many ways about celebrating life. It teaches us to say yes, but it also teaches us at times to say no. Yes to some desires, no to others. And that's why Rabbi Ben Zoma says, who is strong? The person who can say no to themselves. Which leads to his third question. Who is rich? That's a toughie. How do you answer that question? Who is rich? He responds, one who is happy with what he or she has. One who is happy with their lot. I love that response. We often think of rich as in terms of finances, right? There's a good chance you know some people who you think are rich, but they're not happy with what they have. But of course, it goes a lot further than finances. You know the song Dayenu? You'll be singing it a couple of weeks from tonight. What does Dayenu mean? Dayenu means it would have been enough for us, right? And we say it after recognizing some of God's gifts. Had God brought us out of Egypt and not divided the Red Sea, Dayenu. Had God divided the Red Sea and not allowed us to cross onto dry land, Dayenu. Had God given us the Sabbath, Dayenu. It would have been enough. But do we recognize Dayenu in our own lives? My beloved friend, Rabbi Michael Gottlieb, wrote about these 4 questions in his synagogue bulletin, and he sent it to me in advance. And some of these ideas I want to credit him for. I think it's going to be an article in the Jewish Journal next week. And this is what he writes. I wonder how many of us sing that song, referring to Dayenu, and actually mean it. How many of us are happy with our spouse, our children, our friends? Do we repeatedly try to change them to meet our needs and expectations? Dayenu is not a plea for complacency. If anything, it's a plea for perspective and heightened appreciation for the things we have. My friends, that does not mean, at least the way I understand it, that we shouldn't have desires for more things in life. These desires for a better job or a nicer home or the means to take our family to visit places around the world and make their lives richer, those desires are healthy. In fact, they often compel us to work harder to get ahead. They force us to strive for more. The key is to have those healthy desires and at the same time have a deep appreciation for what we have. Those who achieve such a balance are indeed rich. And finally, Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma asks, who is honored? And his response, those who honor others. The Hebrew word for honor is kavod. Kavod also means heavy. And sometimes it's heavy. It's burdensome to show honor to other people because it means we're not focusing on ourselves. That's natural. But it also suggests that having honor, that being honored, is a burden because it means we have to be worthy of that honor and live up to certain responsibilities. You all know the fifth of the 10 Commandments is to honor your father and your mother. Actually, it's honor your mother and your father. The order is important. But the Torah teaches us to show honor in a lot of arenas. Did you know, for example, we're supposed to honor wisdom? We're to show honor, according to Leviticus, we're supposed to show honor to the aged. In Genesis, we're told to show honor to those in authority and to show honor to the scholar. Did you know that we're supposed to stand when our teacher walks into the room? Wouldn't that be a nice lesson for our children to learn? For children all the way through high school to know that when your teacher walks into the room, whether it's a religious school or a secular school, of all the schools in America, children were taught that when your teacher walks into the room, you stand. Wouldn't that be a powerful message? The rabbis taught a great deal about honor, but I'll leave you with these two teachings that I like on the subject in particular. They taught one who achieves honor at the expense of the shame of his fellow man, such a person has no share in the world to come. Is that powerful? If you gained your honor by shaming others, they said you have no chelek in the Yom Haba. You have no spot in the world to come. That's how little they thought of such people. Your honor had to be earned in an honest way. And all too often it's not. And the Talmud also teaches, and this one I absolutely love, it's not the place that a man occupies that gives him honor, but that he gives honor to the place he occupies. It's not the place that a man occupies, that a person occupies, that gives honor, gives him honor, but that he gives honor to the place that he occupies. You know why I love that? Because it means that every single one of us can bring honor to whatever place we are in life. It's a statement of autonomy. Whatever station we occupy, it's in our hands to bring honor to it. And now, I want to ask you a fifth question. What are the last words in your Haggadah? Chances are, some of you know it, but chances are you may not get to that last page. I don't know about you, but I've been to a Seder or two where you get to the eating part, and that's basically it. And maybe you'll have a couple of glasses of wine afterwards just to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 glasses. I'm not saying any of you do that, but I know that some Jews might. But if you turn to the last page of your Haggadah, the last words are, and some of you know it, you said it, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. And I urge you to do it. Get to that last page, even if you got to skip ahead, after the meal. What does that mean? L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Well, next year in Jerusalem could mean, literally, next year, let us have our Seder in Jerusalem. And that's beautiful. But I think it means something else. You see, what does Jerusalem represent? Jerusalem represents, in many ways, Judaism. Pesach, Passover, is the festival of freedom, of liberation from slavery. And that's how we start off. Avadim Chayinu, we were slaves in Egypt, right? But it ends with next year in Jerusalem. What that tells me is that our freedom from slavery was not supposed to be an end in itself. We were freed for a purpose. We were freed to be good Jews. Next year in Jerusalem means next year, the way I understand it, may we be all a little closer to the ideal of Jerusalem, to the ideals of Judaism, to living a life that's closer to becoming more fulfilled Jews. Not only free people, but better Jews. That's why Passover is the beginning of the liberation from slavery, but it leads up to the next Jewish holiday, Shavuot, 49 days later from the second day on, Shavuot, when we receive the Torah. Passover without Shavuot is freedom without meaning. We need to celebrate both, our freedom and the Torah. That's why we were freed, and that's why I believe the last four words of your Seder should be L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. So 2 weeks from tonight, as you gather around your Seder tables, make sure to raise those 4 cups of wine. Make sure to raise some questions. Maybe bring in a little Jewish humor. Here's a one-liner for you. What do you call someone who gets pleasure from eating the bread of affliction, the matzah? A matzahist. Yeah, I knew it wasn't that good. I knew when I read it that I shouldn't have shared it with you. I should have quit while I was ahead. Raise not only the 4 questions, but perhaps even raise the questions that Rabbi Ben Zoma offers. Who is wise? Who is strong? Who is rich? And who is honored? And before you offer Rabbi Ben Zoma's responses, ask those at your Seder how they would reply. I can almost guarantee you it will make your Seder all the more lively and your holiday all the more meaningful. I wish you a wonderful Passover filled with meaning and filled with joy. Shabbat Shalom.